And it was so interesting. And also to meet one of the patients that he's helped who had burns on 90% of her body.
It was
And
amazing that she survived.
it is amazing that she survived. And it was so hard. I mean, she was, because of the drugs she was on, she was out of it a lot of those first months, but her partner was, just day by day, like, is she going to make it?
Welcome to Poppies and Propofol, where we pull aside the curtain on the House of Medicine and talk about like real bioethics things happening in the world. I'm so thrilled. Today we get to talk to Mary Roach, who's a many times over best-selling author of science communication and uses really funny, interesting ways to describe super technical things about medicine and science, and I think in ways that are super accessible. And Mary has a new book coming out called Replaceable You. And so I'm very excited to get to talk about that with her today. Mary, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks, Alyssa.
Um, I
I
love
don't know
that
if I'd
you.
say super technical.
Oh, come on. I mean, listen, this book is just, I am a transplant anesthesiologist. And I feel like when I read a description of, like an understandable description of what it takes to sort of suppress someone's immune system so that we can put a total foreign piece of
Yeah.
tissue in somebody. I mean, I think that counts. That's something that a lot of clinicians, I think, really struggle to do.
Yeah. Okay, I'll take it. I'll take it.
Take the compliment. Um,
Um,
but that actually is a. I mean, I was thinking of asking this later, but how do you think about it when you're obviously following this incredible curiosity, you're learning about these very technical things about the human body.
yeah.
How is it that you think about making things make sense for just regular folks?
Well, I am just a regular folk, so it's pretty easy. I don't have any I didn't go to medical school. I don't even have a BS, for God's sakes. Don't tell anyone. So, I am kind of coming at it from the same place as a lot of my readers, which is helpful.
Mhm.
I don't ever have to worry about being over technical because that stuff is way out in the weeds beyond my understanding.
Mm.
So what I have to worry about is, am I getting this accurate? Or even if it's accurate, do I, because I don't have the big picture, am I going to kind of present it in a way that's not quite right? So that's always my fear. I never have to worry about it being too too technical
Well,
because yeah.
yeah,
But
because
anyway,
you're making sure that if it makes sense to you and you're checking it, I assume with
yeah,
the experts being like, hey, does this track?
right. Right, exactly, exactly. I give it to them to read, but even then, stuff slips through, and I'm like, "Ah."
I mean, I think it happens to everybody, right? Nothing's perfect. That's
Yeah,
life.
right.
Um, and so you've written a bunch of books that have to do with like the human body. You wrote, Stiff, that was all about death. You wrote about, Gulp, which was like, the mouth to anus situation. Like, what is going on in there? How did you end up writing this? It all
It
goes
is, it's
in
like
one
a
end and out the
foreign
other.
country. It's like a foreign country in there, like, whole different set of rules.
Um,
Bacteria? Yeah, bring it on.
and so what ended up getting you curious about this idea of, replaceable body parts? Like, and it's not just transplantation, but like
Yeah,
joint replacements and finger replacements and all sorts of other things.
that was something that it's kind of a natural for me because I'm, always looking for new, ways to talk about the human body because it is this kind of weird foreign planet, for me. It's like because I don't have a background in it, just anytime I learn about some new element of it, like I remember with Gulp going like, "Whoa, stretch receptors." Like that's how your rectum tells you it's like time to empty it because you're like it stretches, tells your brain. I'm like, "Cool. Never knew that." So, this was well, a number of things happened. Well, one was that I got an email from a reader who, had ideas about what my next book should be that weren't quite right. I think pro football referees was what, she really thought I should write about. But anyway, in that conversation, she said, that she was an amputee, specifically an
Oh.
elective amputee, somebody who she'd had spina bifida and there had been situation that caused her foot to be kind of twisted. She'd had multiple operations. She really couldn't walk well, and she would see people with a prosthetic lower leg running, hiking, climbing over rocks, and she was like, "I want that. Why can't I have that?" And it was very hard to find a surgeon who was willing to amputate because they're like, "It's a healthy foot. It has a blood supply. We're not comfortable taking this foot off," and it took her quite a while, and I thought that was kind of fascinating, not just the struggle that she had, but that whole sort of that kind of the bias for wholeness that we have, and I mean, it's a drastic thing to remove a foot before you have to. So, I get why surgeons were hesitant, but anyway, I thought that was fascinating,
Well,
and
I
so
think that that also gets to all of these, as an ethicist, I think there's so many ethical issues that really come through in the book about,
yeah,
not only transplant ethics issues, but like, this story that ended up in the book about this woman with the foot drop and how do we think about I'm always talking about risks, benefits, and alternatives to these
yeah,
things. And how do you partner with as clinicians, how is it that we partner with patients to actually like understand what their goals are and understand what
right,
their worries are and how do you figure out how
yeah.
to navigate those things?
Yeah, exactly, exactly. You could imagine, as a surgeon has concerns about, like, what if there's severe phantom pain that this
Mhm.
person didn't have? I mean, she felt that the functionality of the foot was not where she wanted it, but what if they created a situation where she's got this chronic pain? Or maybe the surgeon just hasn't done that many isn't really that well versed in how to do an amputation and ways to kind of try to ward off phantom pain. What about insurance? You've gotta get insurance to cover it. You gotta prove somehow that this is merited, and so there's a whole lotta and I think also with children, the parents are like, "Well, we're gonna let the kid decide." Like, to be the person who makes a decision for someone else to remove a foot when you don't really know. Maybe the next surgery will fix it, and so the years drag on and the number of surgeries pile up, and it's tough. It's a tough call.
Yeah, and I think that it's so and you talk a little bit about, limb salvaging and like how
Right,
people in vascular surgery have really been like, okay, well we're doing all these things because we really wanted to avoid amputation because we've seen the harms of amputation. We've seen that if there's ways to avoid that we want to be able to avoid it. But,
right.
patients like the one you described, I think like, really end up in that messy middle of like how do we think about it?
Yep,
And I think that the other thing is having even in my relatively short career, you see how things advance and you think, "My gosh, if we'd known what we know now 10 years
right.
ago, wow, this person could have had a better outcome or they could have had
Yep,
a more,
yes.
effective response." And so I think there is this tension of like, do you rush to do something or
Yeah,
do you wait and what are the
right.
trade-offs?
Exactly, exactly, and some of the prosthetists I talked to talked about how one of the downsides of not doing it is that the child kind of incorporates the disfigured limb into their sense of self, and he was saying, if they're just not gonna do it. And there's a certain point where they're not gonna do it, and then, and he said he sees kids kind of suffering that way through multiple surgeries, and then other kids are running like, they're up and running around in 2 months after they get an artificial limb, and what can you do? It's interesting, there are, scores and, like, ways to assess and, tools that help surgeons and patients, I guess, make that choice. Yeah, but it's an interesting ethical
Yeah.
issue. Yeah,
Yeah. I think the other thing I've noticed, and I don't know enough specifically about amputation and prosthetics and things like that, but there are a lot of scoring systems that I think also are designed really with people who are the doctors and the surgeons and the nurses involved that sometimes they don't take into account like, well, what are the trade-offs for this patient? And
yeah,
so I feel like I got to think about those things and those weren't
yeah,
things that had come up for me a lot. Even though I work with kids and kids who are having surgery and kids who are having amputations.
yeah, yeah.
Um,
My favorite of those scoring systems, because the acronym cracks me up. I mean, you don't
we
usually
love an
see humor.
acronym.
Yeah, the Mangled Extremity Severity Score. I'm like, "So you went there with your acronym. You did."
Yeah, I think that sometimes people on the inside of medicine don't think very
Yeah,
deeply about the what it would feel
yeah,
like to be administered such a scoring system.
yeah, yeah, I know. I mean,
Yeah.
it's yeah, sensitivity and humor are awkward bedfellows.
Yeah. Well, and sometimes you laugh because something makes us uncomfortable, and I think you really get to that in a
Yeah,
lot of your writing where you're like, "Yeah, it's funny because it is uncomfortable, and we
yeah,
still wanna be able to talk about these things that are kinda weird."
yeah, and I would imagine for some people, they appreciated that humor, the directness of a scoring system with that I mean, I don't know. It's hard for me.
We'd have to ask.
I'm probably the last person you'd wanna ask for
Well,
that
'cause
assessment.
yeah, we would probably ask the people who ideally, we would ask the people who are most impacted when we come up with these things.
Yeah,
Um,
right.
you have one of the things I also really enjoyed, about this book in particular is that you don't hide the sense of wonder that you have when you sort of are like, "Wait a minute, what are you doing?"
Yeah,
There's a beautiful scene pretty early in the book where um, you're holding a heart. You're learning about extra corporeal, perfusion. You're learning about hearts that are removed from bodies and how they can be transported, for example, for transplant. And there's this beautiful scene where you're like, you're dressed up in a bunch of surgical gown and you get to like hold this heart. What
yes.
was that like?
Yeah, well, I have it was very different than what I anticipated, I guess because I've seen kind of those horrible movies about Aztec sacrifice where they're pulling the heart out and they're like Edgar Allan Poe and slasher movies. The idea of a heart outside of a body is kinda like you imagine it to be horrific, but, it was a quiet room. The heart was just it was attached to a blood supply, and I was basically, like, cupping it. I didn't have it completely, off the machine, but I was holding it, and it was really, I mean, first of all, there's awe that this heart that has been taken from it was a pig's body, and that it's been taken out of the body, and it's still doing its job, It's like, "Well, I was born to pump, and I guess that's what they still want me to do, so I'm pumping." And it was kind of awesome, but also just this it's a human heart, and I found myself, you feel it beat, and you're kind of I was aware of my own heartbeat, and I was kinda wanted to see if they would synchronize somehow, and so I'm holding it for a while, the doctor, the surgeon, Dr. Drake, he finally goes, "Mary, all done now?" Like, "Oh, sorry, here you go." Yeah.
Well, and it's such a again, that moment of wonder, it took me back to seeing my very first open heart surgery, as an anesthesiology resident. And in anesthesiology, we're at the head of the bed. Oftentimes that's where the patient's head is, because most unless you're having surgery done on your face or your neck, your head and face are with us, and then the rest of
Yes.
you is with the surgeon. And getting to, look over the drape and see this beating heart, inside of someone's chest. This person's alive. My
Yeah.
job's to monitor their vital signs, and just what a weird and wonderful thing to be able to go through this procedure with this person. And then I would get to
Yes.
see them later in the ICU, with their
Yeah.
coronary arteries repaired, and
Yeah.
really cool.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember the first time I saw it um was an organ recovery,
Hmm.
for transplantation, and I remember just being shocked at how active it was and thinking, like, "This thing keeps going like that for, like, 70, 80, 90 years without giving up the ghost." Well, hopefully. Just, it's like it's working hard in there, and you're not even aware of it usually, you know?
Yeah, it's and especially when you think about, the if you think about any sort of other like machine, something that we make as human beings, and like
Yes.
even if there isn't planned obsolescence, usually things don't last, many, many decades. And so it's pretty impressive that the
Yeah,
heart can just keep on trucking.
the heart, yeah, the kidneys, the liver, all of it. The fact that it does its job, but the heart in particular, because it is such a it's like a little animal squirming around in its burrow. It's really moving in there. It's you feel your heart, and it kind of feels like a gentle motion, but it's more active than you
Yeah.
imagine, or more active than I imagined. Yeah.
Well, and I think part of that too is that when it's inside of your chest, it's like it's surrounded by your lungs and it's, your diaphragm's at the bottom and
Yes.
underneath your diaphragms, your stomach and your liver and like everything's kind of tucked in there. And there's just enough room for it to do what it needs to do. One of
Yep.
the things that happens when we're using the ventilator during surgery is we have to be careful that we're not using tidal volumes that are too big for the lungs because we can actually make it so the heart can't beat big
Mm.
enough
Yeah.
because it's in this enclosed space.
Yes. Yes. It is. It's a very tight space. Yeah.
So cool. Um, I I was thinking as I was again, I loved your book Fuzz because like I'm an outdoorsy person. I love animals, and a
Yeah.
bear broke into my car when I was
Oh, wow.
out backpacking one time. Um, and it was such a departure, it felt like, for it was clearly there was a bunch of anatomy because you talked about, like, animal mauling people and, like,
Yeah.
how do
The
they do
forensics. Yeah.
investigations? Yeah, the forensic investigations. So there's obviously this through line, but you really came back to anatomy in this
Yeah.
particular book, and I I get this sense that you have this sort of, it seems to me, an insatiable curiosity. How do you think about your curiosity when you're figuring out what your projects are gonna be?
I just follow it. I just follow, I don't have a sense of, I'm going to change position because I'm kind of a weird. Okay. Um, I, sorry for that little earthquake.
No big deal.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I just, the things that kind of stand out to me as worth pursuing, I just have this assumption that my readers are going to be like me. That's the only thing I can do. I'm never doing a comprehensive book, right? There's so much going on in the world of regenerative medicine that I'm like, that's too far out in the weeds for me. And it's changing so fast, and a book has a long lead time. So I'm just like, what seems, like I heard about this surgeon in Tbilisi in former Soviet Georgia who has this unorthodox procedure for rebuilding a penis that involved using the man's finger. I'm like, what? I really am interested in this. And to the extent that I've like called my travel pal Steph and I'm like, we're going to the Caucasus, because the guy I tried Google Translate writing letters in Georgian, in Russian, in English, no reply. I'm like, let's just show up. I'm going to
You just
show
showed up.
I just showed up. Yeah. And he was out of town, but his office manager was great. She's like, "You know what? Let's go in his office. He has pictures on his laptop, on
Oh
his
my
desktop."
gosh. That's
So,
too funny. And it's
um,
and
yeah,
it's interesting too, and you get into this into the book, but like, penises are something that people are quite attached to, and really like there to be one. And so there's
yes,
you talk about these many different attempted solutions that have been made, and some of those
yeah,
were for erectile dysfunction, and some of them
right,
for penises that are like really injured.
yeah.
And yeah, I mean, really get into this variety. I myself had not heard of the finger technique.
I think he's the only one who does it, and he doesn't do it that often.
Yeah,
Um,
well, thankfully there's not a lot of causes.
I don't know why. I mean, there are products, there are implants that you can purchase and use that go slide into the erectile chambers and work pretty well. I'm not sure why he chose to do this, and because he never would reply to me, I still don't know. It remains a mystery. Nonetheless, an interesting alternative method.
An interesting opportunity. Um, well, and the other thing that you got into as well was sort of the history of kind of how did we get here in terms of
Yeah,
you know people with nose injuries and the history of like trying to create flaps from people's arms and just the kind of endless creativity of human beings to be like, all right, well, what can we do about this
yeah,
very strange situation?
yeah, yeah, and really going back farther than I'd imagined, these surgical techniques. I mean, going back to like 1500 BCE, that technique where because nasal mutilation was a common punishment throughout history, because it's a horrible thing, and it's right on your face, so everybody sees it. So it's also a bit of a deterrent for the community, horribly. Um, so surgeons figured out you could just take a flap from here or here, keep it attached to either the forehead or the chin, and flop it over here onto what remains of the nose, and then, it still has the blood supply from where it started out, and then a few weeks later, after the blood supply begins to grow into the skin, then you separate it. I was like, "Whoa, you did this back then."
And we
And
still do it now. I
yeah,
mean,
yeah.
that to me was also the through line is I'm like, "Man, I did one of those, like, last week," you
Yeah,
know?
yeah,
You
it's
know
still exactly. And then I love the guy Gaspari Tagliacocci, who I think was it in the 1500s? I wanna say. Anyway, he was like, "Why are we messing with the face? Let's take, the underside of the arm, and we can use that." But the problem then is that you have to have that near your face. We had this whole, like, harness set up to hold the arm, and the face had to be like that. It kinda looked like they were checking for BO.
Yeah.
But
Well, and
but
there's a bunch of old surgical drawings
yes.
from the 1500s, of course, of
Yes, with
people
the
in this
harness. Yeah.
position.
There's a whole harness holding it up like that.
W
And I
and
thought,
one
but yeah. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, well, and one of the things that we think a lot in when someone's under general anesthesia, they can't move their body, and so you have to really worry
Right.
about pressure injuries. So if, we have to have all this padding and we move people during
Yep.
surgeries to make sure they don't get pressure injuries. And I was just imagining, I was like, that's not good for the shoulder joint. Like that's a bad.
I know. Oh god. Yeah, plus, there's no the blood supply would mean it just seems like a but I get why he wanted to do it,
Of
but,
course.
yeah, anyway.
Yeah, so but very it was interesting to me that these uh very creative attempted solutions in the far distant past, like some of them have continued to be
Yes.
the way. Like it
Yes.
isn't like everything that happened in the 1500s was total garbage and
Right.
scary and never worked. Like we're literally still doing some of these techniques now very
Yeah.
effectively.
Right, it just has a different name, like what the median forehead flap, whatever. It's got a more, technical name, but it's basically the same procedure, yeah.
Yeah, and we're also moving towards or moving away from having things named after people who came up
Yes.
with them and trying to have names
Yeah,
that are
yeah,
descriptive and accurate.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, Tagliacozzi, I loved him because he's, apparently the hospital where he worked and taught, there is a statue of him, you can find it online,
Oh,
and it's in, like, a niche in the wall, and he's kind of stepping forward out of the niche, and he's holding something, and you were like, "What is it?"
is it
And
a
you look
nose?
closely, it's a nose.
Oh,
He's
man.
holding a nose, yeah, and the same in his portraits. He'll be like, there's this sort of the book and the kind of the classic kind of scholarly portrait, but then he's like, "Yep, it's a nose. This is what I do. It's a nose."
Such clever use of artists in making portraits of people to try to tell you a little more about them,
Yeah,
huh?
exactly,
This guy's really into
exactly.
noses.
He's a nose guy, he's the
He's
nose
an
guy.
he's the nose guy. And he must have also I mean, I don't really I know you talked a lot about him in the early part of the book, but, like, is that all he did was
Yeah.
just, like, mostly noses?
No, no, he did a lot of things. I think he was particularly proud of his noses. No, he
Well,
did a lot.
it was a real need.
It was a need, and he filled it.
Thankfully, loss of one's entire nose is much less common than it once was, it sounds like.
Yes, it is, yes. And
Um
that's a good thing.
Yes, absolutely. We don't need to have that kind of social
Good
deterrent.
good God, no.
Um, and then I also really I worked in a burn unit. The medical school I went to had a burn unit, and I did a rotation there, and I really appreciated the way that you described being in a burn unit because it's such a there's so many
Yeah,
places in hospitals and in clinics that are there I joke that like the bat cave, like no one knows what's happening in there. You don't know it's just
yeah,
sort of this mysterious place.
yeah, yeah, it was incredibly generous of Jeremy Goverman to say, "Yeah, uh, you can come here and follow me around for 2 days," which is what I did, and it was so interesting, and also to meet, one of the patients that he's helped who had burns on 90% of her body,
It was
and
amazing that she survived.
it is amazing that she survived, and it was so ha I mean, she was because of the drugs she was on, she was out of it a lot of those first months, but her partner was, just day by day, like, is she gonna make it? And he got the very real sense from the surgeons and the people in the ICU that she's really sick. Like, he's like, "Yeah, I know she's sick. Are you saying she's not gonna," it was so hard for him too.
Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
and I think that clinicians struggle with, like, how to talk about that because at the same time, like, she did survive, and that truly when you talked about the percentage of burns in her body, I was like, "Wow."
yeah,
She
it's
really
amazing. Yeah,
and clearly got exquisite care, and
yeah,
that's but what a hard thing for him to
yeah,
go through. That's something that, there's a physician comedian, Dr. Flecken. His wife talks about co-survivorship because he has had several really severe, health issues, and
yeah,
she talks about how hard it is to be the person who's the loved one,
yeah,
and how a lot of times that person doesn't get kind of acknowledged in terms of how hard it
yep,
is to be the person hoping for the best.
right. I think, yeah, for the first few months, it was harder for him. Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. Yeah, and you can see
Ni
that in him. She's pretty. I mean, she's an amazing person. She's obviously really resilient and really charismatic, and you can tell he's just, it changed him. He's a fairly serious person. I mean, maybe he always was, but what a thing to go through, you know?
Yeah, no kidding. And, yeah, just it was really interesting to see, especially for me, I'm mostly hospital-based, so I don't have a clinic, I'm not other than, when I was in
Yeah,
medical school and I was in clinics,
yeah,
a lot of times we see people at their absolute, their worst, we see people at their lowest. It's also we, like, only remember the people where things didn't work out because we tend to be very negative,
oh yeah,
and so it was nice to hear about somebody who, like, made it and got to tell this story,
yeah,
um and as a way for you to also talk about the many different things that people have tried in
yeah,
order to address, like, severe burns and what
yeah,
kinds of problems those cause. I thought the fish
yeah.
one was funny.
The cod, yeah,
The fish the codfish, skin.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It was interesting. Dr. Goverman was pretty straightforward about that stuff. He's like, yeah, you could use Mepilex, which is a, antibacterial foam. So you could use Mepilex, that'll cost you $10, or you could use cod and that'll cost you 1,000. They're all dressings in a sense, and ultimately you want the patient's own skin. But with 90% burn, there's nothing left to graft in the beginning. So
Yeah,
you have to wait and whoosh,
yeah,
yeah, what a
yeah. The, and so I've taken care of a lot of patients who have a condition called epidermolysis bullosa, which is where the skin, because of a genetic condition, the skin doesn't stay attached. And so any sort
oh,
of shear force on the skin
whew,
makes it come off, and it
wow,
causes really severe burns. It's very painful. Um, there's different there's a range of ways that it comes out, but there's super interesting research being done in terms of taking um, patients' own
yeah,
stem cells and then creating patches of skin that actually
yeah,
do not have this genetic condition
oh
so that you
wow,
can and so you'll put them on, like, the areas that are most at risk for skin injury. So they start with, like, elbows and knees and,
wow, yeah,
jaws and things like that. A lot of that's just starting to come. There's
yeah.
there's one type that I believe is now FDA approved, and then, there's
Is
some
that
other ones being tried.
Yeah, is that cultured epithelial autograft?
Yep,
Yeah,
yep,
yeah, they use that a fair amount. They were using that on the woman that
mhm.
I was introduced to, and also spray-on skin, which is similar, but
Yeah, wild.
yeah, spray-on skin, TM. But yeah, but actually, you'd have the sort of the meshed graft, and then you'd fill in the spaces in the mesh with, some of the patient's own cells, that would
Yeah,
it just sort of speeds up the healing. Yeah,
yeah,
amazing. Yeah, and there's a full Cutis, I think, is the company that's, I don't think it's approved yet. It was a compassionate use,
mhm.
exemption that was being used on a young boy that when I was there, and that would be like a full thickness, not just few cells thick,
Yeah.
but a full thickness, skin growth, well, of the patient's own, cells, which is amazing. That would be great.
Yeah, and I'm curious to see also how all of this, the scientific discoveries around things like skin and around regenerating other types of tissues. I doing solid organ transplant. Like think it'd be amazing if one day we could like grow enough liver tissue in a culture that we could just give that to people who have liver
Yeah.
failure and not need to do some of the other
Yes.
more macabre things that we do.
Yeah, yeah, very much so. Or if xenotransplantation got to the point where, I mean, I think there is somebody now who's at about 8 months with a pig kidney.
Yeah, I believe
Um,
so.
yeah, Tim
Which is as
Andrews.
long. I don't think we've ever had anybody survive that long. Many times it's
Mm-mm.
like
It's
a
usually
couple
2
weeks.
months. Most of them
Yeah.
were about 2 months, but they were really sick. Like, 'cause it was a compassionate use, I think, exemption, so even though the organs aren't FDA approved yet, they were like, "Look, this person's gonna die, and they wanna do it, so let's try it out." So,
Yeah, and it's an interesting ethical question of, like, if somebody's too sick to get a human transplant, we don't think that it's a good use of a
yeah,
human organ to give it to this person because of whatever these conditions are, but we'll offer you this, at a bargain basement price, we'll offer you this,
yeah,
research tool basically where
yeah,
it's this pig kidney.
right,
Um,
right, right, yeah, like, how long did they really expect them to live? I mean, I understand the need for the research to go forward, that you need
sure.
to try it, and I think now there's a trial going on with a few dozen patients with,
Mhm.
an eGenesis kidney, but yeah, I mean, it's major surgery that this person's gonna get and have to recover from, immunosuppression, because 'cause they're still immunosuppressed even though it's not as extreme a reaction as it would be if they didn't edit the pig and the organ, but it's still, they're still on a heavy dose, and
Yeah, and it's that question also of like, if you're only gonna live 2 more months, do you wanna spend it
yeah,
in this way,
right,
versus how long
right.
could you live, without that transplant? And,
Yeah,
these are complex choices that obviously people are facing.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I know. It's really, yeah, it's really interesting, and
Yeah,
you just hope that the patients are given all the information they need to make that decision, you know?
yeah, absolutely. It was interesting also reading about, like, I knew that there was a bunch of research being done in China on organ because very few people donate their organs in China.
Yeah,
And I know more, I had known more about, the use of political prisoners and the really terrible things that were being done
yes,
of, like, really claiming that people were consenting to donate their organs, when they were
yeah,
dying, but we know that that's not true.
no,
Um, and it's been interesting seeing, for example, people who are of the Falun Gong religion or other
yes,
people who are political, refugees from China. When we see them in American hospitals, it's so interesting because so few people in the United States are aware of that history, and
yeah,
so I was relieved to see that you clearly were trying to weave that into like this is part of why we really need to figure out
right,
alternatives because some
yeah.
governments have done some really awful things.
Yeah, and I mean, one reason I went to China is because the 2 companies here, eGenesis and United Therapeutics, wouldn't allow me anywhere near the facility, which is, it's biotech. They're wary. I get it. So that was one reason I went, but I actually felt like it was a better setting for the xenotransplantation chapter because there's this need, because people don't donate, because culturally there's a sense of, that your body is given to you by your ancestors and it's insulting. You don't you don't mess with it. And also since it's associated with death row prisoners now, it feels like a punishment there. So it's going to be pretty hard to get people up and running on organ donation. Yeah, and it's still going on. That
Yeah,
is
well,
to
and
say that, yeah, right.
yeah, we don't believe that it has stopped.
No.
And especially for people who aren't aware, like there are times where you can schedule your heart transplant in China, and so that is not something you can do anywhere else.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah.
yeah, and
How often are Americans going to China for transplants? Is
I
that
don't I don't think we have I don't have, off the top of my head, any good numbers.
Yeah.
We know that there is organ transplant tourism, and we know that that's
Right.
an industry in China. I do not, off the top of my head, have
Yeah.
any idea
Yeah.
kind of what that's like. And I think, people have to then find a cardiologist here, for example, if it's a heart
Right.
transplant, to help manage them after
Right.
they come home.
Right.
So I'm not sure. It's a good
Yeah.
question. I'd have to look
Yeah.
up. But,
Yeah. It was interesting to talk to people there and if the xenotransplantation, if it progresses to the point where it is a viable alternative, I mean, that would, particularly in China, save a lot of lives.
Well, and here too, and I don't know how much you followed the controversy in the US where there is I think back in 2021 or 2022 there was a case in Kentucky of a man being taken for donation after circulatory death, and
Oh,
then he started moving around and
right.
it turns out he wasn't dead.
Yeah,
Um
right.
and
I've seen that and yeah, there was a lot of pressure on OPOs to up the numbers of organs that they place,
Yep.
and so that's not a good thing to do.
Yeah.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
people were trying to hit quotas, and that's
Yeah. Yeah,
really bad.
and it's interesting, right? Because, transplant is a big business in America. It is, I mean,
Yeah,
everywhere, obviously,
yeah,
but in America, it's a big thing that really drives bringing patients into a healthcare system and
yep,
continuing to get care from other specialists and
right,
establishing relationships. And yeah, organ procurement organizations really pushing those.
yes,
We see it in our ICUs, and it is quite disconcerting. And
yeah,
I have always worried and have always brought up to the OPO, like, hey guys, when you do things this way, I feel like it's actually not helping transplant. And like, I love transplant. I love doing kidney transplants. I love doing liver
yeah,
transplants. And I really want people to feel confident that when they donate their organs, that they will be treated with dignity and respect and that they will actually be dead.
yeah.
So
Well, and
there's,
also, I think, anytime something like that hits the news, it's so damaging in terms of the people that it discourages.
yep,
Because the majority of time, I like to think it is done well, and the
yep,
person is dead and not actually just sleeping. I'm
yep.
all right. I'm not dead yet.
I'm
It's
not
not.
dead
I'm
yet.
not dead yet. So, people get this sense of a risk that is probably larger than it really is. So, it's like when I wrote Stiff, every time there would be a case where the person handling the willed body program was profiting on the side, or a crematorium, like, let's just take these parts and, they'll never know. Anytime that hits the news, so many people are discouraged from donating.
Sure. Yeah, and I mean, there was just a huge scandal just maybe a few years ago at Harvard, where the person who was in their wheeled body program was selling all sorts of body parts, and it was a real
Yeah.
disgrace.
Yeah, and it's not well regulated or consistently regulated, so there's room for that to happen, and it's so disheartening because I mean, I understand why people are like, you know what, maybe no, maybe I don't want to do this.
Yeah.
The trust is eroded, and I get why people don't want to do it, and there's such a need for these parts, and on the one, yeah, it's like, I don't know, my basic feeling is like I'm dead. I'm not gonna give a shit. I'm dead. I would like to be dead, though.
Yeah, 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 for
That's where I
sure.
draw the line.
And I
Don't
do
take it
think
till I'm dead.
Yeah, I mean, and I do think that that is done well at the vast majority of places. And of course, if you're an individual person, you only care about it being done in one particular person, and so that's where the rubber
Yeah.
really hits the road, for
Right,
your
right.
family.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, I don't know if people can look into, like, is it because there's tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, and I think that was part of some of the OPOs wanting to be a higher tier, and so that's maybe where the quotas came from, but, there are places that are I mean, the place that I went, Core in Pittsburgh, seemed like they do a really great job. But how do you know? How do you, as the soon
Well,
to be dead person, how do you
yeah.
know? Like, you can't shop around.
Yeah, and that, you know, your family's trying to make decisions for you. You're doing
Right,
the best you can.
right.
And, one of the things that's tough too about OPOs is like it's a stressful, I think it's a very stressful
Yeah.
business to be in.
Yes.
And you're dealing with a lot of, anger and exhaustion and families who are experiencing immense tragedy. And
Yep,
I think all of that, there's a lot of human beings involved in all these
yep.
things. And so, in general, I think that things need more oversight. My
Yeah.
hospital actually still we require an ethics consultation for every donation after circulatory death, which is highly unusual.
Oh,
I'm
yeah.
not
Yeah, that's great.
we
Yeah,
can't stop them from approaching families, but we at least can document in the medical record if we have real concerns about things that are going on.
yeah.
Um, but yeah, we really noticed when OPOs switched from, they used to use an algorithm to decide who they were going to approach for DCD. And then when this drive to increase the number of organs happened, they decided basically they were going to approach everybody.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
created some very different ethical issues.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
And a lot of people don't qualify.
Yeah,
A lot
exactly.
of the majority of people have had some kind of illness or some sort of behavior issue, or that is to say drug use, or something that puts them at risk of, transferring a virus to somebody. So,
Yeah,
yeah,
I mean, there's certainly a lot more testing that goes on each year in terms of
yeah,
determining whether somebody's a good candidate to donate
right,
organs or not a good
right.
candidate. Um,
Yeah,
I'm personally not a registered organ donor because of the behavior I've seen from OPOs, so I just want my family to be able to make that decision and not
yeah.
have it be a first person authorization situation,
Oh,
which I think
interesting.
says a
Yeah.
lot as a transplant doctor.
Yes.
That's my choice.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But, yeah, it's interesting. Being I don't did you ever get to see any transplants get done in
I
your work?
saw a recovery when I wrote Stiff.
Yeah, yeah.
I saw the organs recovered in the parade of surgeons who came through with their coolers and then
Yeah.
headed out to various destinations. Yeah, which
It
was
is a
pretty cool.
very strange being an anesthesiologist in those cases is always also strange because the patient is
It's
usually
dead.
brain
Yeah.
dead,
Yeah, yeah.
uh,
It is
and I
weird. It's
always
like, yeah, that like that you see the heartbeat on the monitor, and you touch the patient, they're warm, but they're
yeah.
dead. Yeah.
Yeah, and you can see well, and also, like, these definitions of death are meant to make it possible for us to do things like
Yes.
transplantation, and because we feel strongly that people are not gonna be able to recover,
Yeah.
um, I always go through all the documentation before I do a recovery because I really wanna be sure that I am
Yeah.
confident that the person is dead, because it's
Yeah.
such a strange thing. Because basically once the aorta is clamped for them to take out the heart and the lungs, we just turn off the monitor and you turn off the ventilator and you just leave,
They flatline, yeah. I know,
and
I
it is
stayed, I saw that happen. I
yeah,
know.
and if we don't turn off the alarms, like, everything just, like, alarms
Yeah,
because
yeah.
they're vital sign monitors and you're using
I
them for
know,
someone who's not
it is
vital.
it's bizarre. Yeah.
It's a very strange thing, but I'm very fortunate that I get to do I mean, in the course of my career, I've gotten to do pretty much every kind of solid organ transplant at some point or another.
Yeah.
And, I will say kidney transplants are some of my favorites because, once the kidney starts to we say it's waking up, like it's getting
Yeah.
perfused and the color is looking good, and you can actually tell as soon
Yeah.
as the ureter is reattached. We always have a Foley catheter, and we start to measure. We dump some patients still make some urine, and so
Yeah.
we'll get rid of whatever urine we have from earlier in the case,
Yeah.
and then we'll measure, and
Yeah.
I'll be able to tell the surgeon, I'll be like, 10 more milliliters,
Yeah.
and everyone's like, "Yay." Um,
Amazing.
it's pretty cool, that
Yeah.
you can take somebody who has been,
Yeah.
dying of sorry, pardon me, dying of,
Yeah.
kidney failure, and then you do this amazing, pretty straightforward. I mean, they're not
Yeah.
always straightforward, but in general, a kidney transplant's not the most complicated of transplant surgeries. Um,
Yeah,
and it's fun.
I remember, I was at a hair transplant clinic, and that's an all-day job, and the guy's like, "Yeah, you could do a kidney transplant in half the time that it takes to get all these follicles out and put them in one by one." It was it's kind of
Oh, that's
amazing.
funny. I'd never thought about how long that would take.
It's a lot. Yeah, I think you break for lunch.
Yeah, people must be that kind of almost sounds like when people get, hair when my friends get their hair braided,
It's a
where
yeah, yeah,
you're
anything
with a
with
braider
hair.
for, like, 12
Yeah,
hours, and I'm like, "Wow," it's like I had never thought about the time involved
yeah,
in,
yeah,
some
you
of
could
these
do 3
things.
kidneys in that time.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It
it
is
is, it's amazing.
interesting. It is interesting too, because if we sometimes you accept 2 kidneys because you get kidneys sometimes from the same donor if you have
Yeah,
your patients are highest on the list, and so you'll actually do back-to-back kidney transplants. So in one night, you might do 2 kidney transplants
yeah,
overnight. The organs show up at midnight or 1 a.m., and then you just spend all night long just putting
yeah.
kidneys in.
Wow, pulling an all-nighter.
Well, there's a lot of all-nighters in transplant. Well, because
Yeah,
the
'cause you
donations
don't have much time, yeah.
well, and the donations, a lot of times, the procurements are happening in the middle of the night because you
Yeah.
have to wait for the operating rooms to be available.
Oh, right.
You're not gonna bump the surgery of a living person who
Sure,
needs a
right.
medical procedure so that you can take organs out of a person who has died.
Sure, yeah.
So, this is also why there's, procurement centers now. So, you some places will actually do the procurement during the
In the
day.
facility. Oh, oh, yeah.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, and I always joke a liver transplant is the best liver transplant because 'cause you're more awake and
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
friends around, the sun is out, you can, like, order
Yeah.
lunch to be ready
Yeah.
when you're able to get out. When you finish a transplant at, 4 o'clock in the morning, there's not a lot of options unless you live
Yeah.
in, like, New York.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, the tissue recovery right, in New York, there would be. The tissue recovery that I saw, I think they finished up at 4 in the morning.
Yeah,
Um,
you must have been tired too.
I did yeah, I was tired, and then I walked back to the hotel, and it's like this you walk by the front desk at 4 a.m. wearing the clothes from the previous day, and you get, like,
It's a
the
different walk of shame.
walk of shame look. I'm like, "Look, I'm too old for that." It's not what you think. I was watching
That's
them, like, remove some guy's bones and muscles and
I was
tendons.
with a dead person. That
Yeah,
is not
God, what do you think I am?
um I'm sorry. I had never thought of the walk of shame of,
Yeah,
we do sometimes say that when we're, like, walking to our car at 4 in the morning and,
yeah,
like, um, that's funny. I had
yeah,
never thought about walking into a hotel like that.
yeah, yeah. He definitely gave me a look like, "Okay,
Yeah.
alright."
Um you've described yourself, I've seen as, like, the gateway drug to, science, that's, like, you're a great
Yeah, yeah,
your books are a great intro to that, and it made me think about, I feel like Dolly the sheep was my gateway drug to bioethics. Like, I remember when Dolly the sheep was on the cover of Time magazine
yeah,
and, like, "Cloning, we're doing
yeah.
it." Um, and I wonder when you are thinking about the ways that people are sort of engaging with your work and the ways that it's sort of opening up science, um, is there anything you're like trying or hoping to accomplish or encouraging, or how do you think about that?
Um, I am, I think of myself kind of I write science books for people who think that they're not interested in science, you know what I mean? I consider it a victory if somebody who has that kind of impression that science is a slog or it's boring, that they'll read a book and go, "Oh, actually this is cool and it's entertaining. Wow, okay." Like just to bring people on board to science as something to learn about, outside of I have to learn about it because it's my biology class.
Yeah,
And especially now, I think when so many people are taking their medical advice from people who don't have a medical background at all, uh, from influencers, and we're moving so far away from facts and solid information that if I can pull people in, I mean, the other side of that is that I don't have a medical degree, so I'm always like, "Oh, am I gonna get everything right?" But, I feel like I'm gonna get it more right than a lot of a lot of influencers who
yeah.
are
Well, and I
talking
think
about
that's that.
nutritional supplements and
Yeah,
skincare and without really any knowledge of the biochemistry of skin or, digestion or nutrition, and, so it's like, that's not where you wanna get your advice, but how did we get to this point where people don't trust science and they trust some rando person on TikTok? you know?
Yeah, I mean, I no, that's a very important question right now, and I certainly don't have all the answers, but I think that when you're engaging in this, I mean, listen, it's a slog to do like pipetting. I've done it. I've run a lot of genetics gels and things early on, and the actual doing of science obviously is highly
Yeah,
a lot of expertise involved and very, very technical. And yet it's so cool to read about things that people have tried and that people have come up
yes,
with.
yeah,
Um, Obviously, we're living in a time where there's a lot of mistrust and distrust of expertise of all kinds.
yeah,
And we now have lots of people running the government who share those beliefs and are sort of amplifying
yeah,
them. And the social media companies have done a lot to help boost
yeah,
those beliefs, because
yeah,
we're hearing so much more about what we like as
yeah,
opposed to
yeah,
what might make us uncomfortable, but if we were curious, what might we
right,
learn? And
right,
I think also that people like me, I mean, I'm trying to be obviously I try to be very compassionate when I'm talking with patients and I'm talking with families and trying to understand what people really mean.
yeah,
And a lot of us, we haven't gotten any training in how to deal with that, or how to do that
yeah,
effectively.
it's
And
all new.
yeah, well, I mean, the anti-vaccine stuff, which obviously is
Right.
is as old as the first,
Oh, yeah,
scab of smallpox being
yeah,
smeared on somebody.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
but
no, that is I remember I was looking up something in the Lancet or something, some medical journal from the early 1900s, and they were talking about a vaccine, and then the patient, and it was a note, it's a letter to the editor, and they said, and the patient didn't get the vaccine, then something happened, and he said, "And thank God they didn't get the vaccine because they would blame the vaccine." And I'm like, "Good
oh,
God, this was like 150
yeah,
years ago." And
yeah, and a
that's
lot of
been there
the
all along, just like
yeah.
kind of assuming a link just because something happened after that. There's just that it's not how the world works.
Yeah, correlation and causation are
Exactly.
not the same.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, and it's also where so many of the concerns about anti-vaccination that have remained the same, it's unnatural, it's against God,
Yeah.
why would we put a toxin in our body or whatever? I'm always fascinated by people who, for example, are like opposed to vaccination, but then get like things done to their face, like using strange products that are like plumpers and fillers and things. And I'm
Yeah.
like, there's an interesting
Yeah.
dichotomy
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
beliefs. And I think for a lot of, I mean, there's a lot of amazing people writing about the pressures I think on moms in particular to like that if something happens to your child, it's your
Yeah.
fault. And there's just a lot of anxiety. A lot of people have had bad experiences with doctors
Well,
and hospitals.
yeah, exactly, and drugs and devices and things make it out into practice before some of the effects of them are known, or sometimes they're concealed, so, people I understand where this mistrust can come from, you
Yeah.
know, because
Yeah.
things do go wrong, and sometimes I mean, look at OxyContin and, like, the cover-ups that, like, of
Mhm.
course, people mistrust science and medicine, I understand how that happens, it's just really unfortunate.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that you know, your your books are really such good faith explorations of these things, and I think the fact that you again with these like funny uncomfortable questions and things like that really highlight those ethical issues and leaves the readers to really explore and think about some of those things on their own. So I can,
Mm,
I hope that that is
yeah,
something that somebody finds it and thinks, "Oh, well, I don't know,
yeah.
maybe it's not all bad."
Yeah, I mean, I always end up having so much respect for the people in the chapters of my book. I mean, I think my books, because of the kind of research I do where I need to go there and be there, they kind of self-select for really good, dedicated, kind people. The kind of
Mm.
person who's like, "You know what? I am really slammed and busy, but yeah, you can come here and be a pest for 2 days." There's really nothing in it for them. So when they say yes, I'm like, "You are solid gold, man."
Yeah, you seem to have a knack for finding people with, that generosity of spirit to be
Yeah.
like, "Okay, it'll probably be okay."
Yeah, yeah, exactly, exactly. That is what they have to think. It'll probably be okay. But I think also that there are just a tremendous number of them out there in this field,
Yeah.
whether it's research or medicine. People get involved in that for really impressive reasons, and there's just a lot of good work and a lot of good people, and it's sad when, as a general kind of chunk, medicine and science get kind of pushed aside as something to dismiss. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we'll just slowly follow it and figure out what's gonna happen, and,
Yeah.
we're living in a very they said live in interesting times, Mary, and we're doing it.
Yeah, we sure are.
We're doing it. We're gonna see what havoc, returns to us with our current administration's, dismantling of public health.
Yeah.
I'm to say I'm a little worried is a significant understatement, but,
Yeah. I know.
what can you do? There's all sorts of diseases I've never seen as a pediatric anesthesiologist that I've read about, and I would like to never see, but,
Yeah.
we'll
Yeah.
see.
Well,
Um
keep doing all the good work that you do.
Oh, well,
No.
and you can keep writing about all the fun things that you write about. Um, is there I'm trying to write more things for the public, things that are, science communication, health communication. What advice do you have for writers who are trying to figure out but I mean, I know we talked earlier that you say, "Well, I'm writing for people like me." What advice do you have for people who are experts who are trying to like write for people like you?
Um, I guess, try it out on family members who don't have a medical background and see if they know what you're trying to
See if
get
it
across,
see
or
if
if
it
the
makes
eyes
sense.
glaze over, um, that kinda thing. Some people are really good at that, and for others, it's a struggle. I think people who are good at it realize that you have this gift and maybe try to use it. Try to, whether it's something on social media or a Substack or a newsletter, whatever it is, there's such an appetite for that, for good, straightforward medical advice about various things. And yeah, I just feel like if you have that gift, use it.
Yeah. Well, you heard it here first, folks. So if you're interested in science writing, just try it and everything will be okay. You'll figure it out.
There are programs too.
For sure.
There are very good science writing programs. Santa Cruz has one, NYU has one, so there's also that route.
Lots of opportunities.
Yeah.
Well, I am so grateful that I got to chat with you. For folks who are looking, this book, Replaceable You, comes out next week. It's very exciting, so you can pre-order it wherever books are sold. And Mary, I'm just so grateful to you. This was such a wonderful conversation, and I can't wait to see what you explore next.
Well, thank you so much, Alyssa. I really enjoyed it, and thanks for anybody tuning in. And have a wonderful rest of your day.
Awesome. You too. Take care.
All right, take care.
Bye.
Bye.